All right, so welcome to today's session of the Radian Soul Developer and Coordinator Training. On today's session, we will be covering actions for the coordinator and developer user roles. We will take a look in the payment manager tool and review how to compile a payment collection and have payments be reviewed and approved for processing. And I can show you the approval scheme admin, and we'll cover some basic land and payment concepts along the way. So when you first log in, you'll end up on the global map, and you can navigate to Payment Manager, main navigation menu, Features, Payment Manager to open up the Payment Manager tool. From the coordinator perspective, you will likely be spending most or a lot of your time within that application within Payment Manager. So the intent of this tool is to give you visibility on upcoming payment obligations, and then to organize those payment obligations and prepare them for processing. So um, the coordinator takes the first action in terms of uh, getting payments ready for payment processing. And that's going to occur here on the Open Commitments tab of Payment Manager. And I think I saw that you already have a batch of the June payments have already been put into a payment collection. So I'll show you that in a moment. But before we get there, Open Commitments is going to show you open payment obligations that are not in a payment collection yet. So this is where you would find the payments that need to be paid and put them into a collection. By default, the filter here is showing payments that are due in the next 30 days, but you can open up the filter here and adjust this. So maybe we'll go out another month and submit. And so now we see payments for July going forward. We don't see the June payments here because they've already been put into a payment collection. Oh, there are some, I'm getting some June payments, the end of June, right? Um, and the filter, you can also filter by a specific project, or you can filter by a project status. So the project status will help you, selection will help you auto select projects that are at that status. So if we wanted to look at projects that are pre-COD, you could select those project statuses, and then the project filter will automatically select them. This is multi-select, so you can use Control Select to add or remove your selections. And then within open commitments, on the column on the right here, you have the ability to select payments to include in a payment collection. So payment collection, the concept of a payment collection is it's a batch of payments that will be processed or reviewed and approved and processed. So it's a way of organizing your payments for processing them. And so we can gather, I'll just select a handful of, we could sort by date here. And so just select, we'll get all of these Shorts payments here. We'll put them into a collection. So I'll just grab a few of these to put into a demo collection to show you what this looks like. You can select by all project or select everything that you filtered for here as well. There's also a search option available to further refine your filter options. We'll just grab these 5 payments here, and I'm creating a new collection uh, by typing in the collection name here. If you already have a collection that you're compiling in draft, that's in draft status, you could add these selections to an existing draft collection. So we can see there's already a draft collection that's been compiled. I'll just put these into a new demo collection. And when I select submit, we are automatically moved over to the draft tab of Payment Manager. And these are the collections that are at status draft. There's a batch of June payments going here. There's a handful of June payments that may be expected to be included in there. Uh, I'll be deleting this demo collection when we're done today. And so if I were to delete this collection, these payments would be restored to open commitments because they would no longer be in a collection. And you can delete collections here. You could also, if you've created a collection and then you decide that you don't want to have a payment be in that collection, you can exclude it, hit submit, and then these payments would go back to open commitments again.
Hey, Clay, I see Rebecca
Yeah.
has her hand up.
Yeah, question, please.
Yeah, thanks. I have a question. If let's say we go to start to make a collection and we did the filter, we expected something that's going to be coming due in the next 30 days, but we don't see it there. Let's just assume that it was already paid and we didn't realize for whatever reason. What would be the best way to search if you're like, oh, where is that?
Great question. So I'll go back to Payment Manager, and there's another tool available here called Payment Lookup. And so this is a great way to find payments that maybe you don't know if they've been paid yet or not. You don't know if they're in a collection yet or not. Payment Lookup, there you can build a filter here. And so we'll do we'll do the June we'll go through the end of July. And we'll do pre-operations. And so you have the option here. You can search for all payments, unpaid or paid. We'll just do everything. Select submit. And now we're seeing everything. And so something to note here is that some of these payments, they're already in a collection. So if you were searching for them on open commitments, they're not going to show up. But on payment lookup, they will show up. And then payment lookup would also show, you can see the status of the payment as well. So if you're not sure what's going on with a payment and you're trying to track it down, I would recommend using the payment lookup tool. And so we can see if we were to filter here by collection, we can see which payments are in a collection. And then we can see some of these payments are not in a collection. And then there's a URL here as well. So you could just click on this to get back into a collection if you wanted to. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep, great. Yeah, please feel
Clay,
free to
I've got a follow-up question to
hop
that.
in. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm on the screen as well, looking to the same thing. The status column looks like it does have like a drop-down option as well. What are the kind of different statuses that we're looking for there? And then I also see exported to ERP, which I expect that means like it was synced over to NetSuite. So I guess just kind of how do we read those two columns?
Yeah. So for statuses, right, there's going to be active or complete. There's also you could put a payment on hold, so that would be another status. Typically, placing a payment on hold might be for if there's a pending amendment and you're waiting for the amendment to come through, and you just don't want to make that payment yet until the amendment gets completed. You could put it on hold. Putting something on hold pretty much takes it out of the workflow, and it's just going to stay on hold until you take it off of hold. You can have visibility on payments that are hold in the hold payment tab.
So is it removed from open commitments, but put in like the hold payment group? Is that kind of the way to think about it?
Correct. So payments on hold cannot be in a payment collection, or it would remove them from a collection and place them
Okay.
on hold. Yeah, you
Okay.
can also just from open commitments, you could place something on hold directly here. So it's not like it would have to go into a collection and then on hold. I think you can
Gotcha.
even place things on hold directly from let's just get
Yeah, so even something within a hold status is still viewable and searchable in the payment lookup.
correct. It would show up here as being
Okay.
status hold.
And then
Yeah,
you
you
have the
can
hold button there. Would you have
yeah,
a unhold button as well? Like if something was listed here as being held and you're ready to remove it and let it go back into open commitments, can you take that action here?
I think you have to do that from hold payment.
Okay.
Yeah. Because when you place something on hold, you're capturing a rationale and then also a description to unhold it.
Got it.
I think
Okay.
unhold happens only from hold payment, but
Okay.
the held payments will show up in payment lookup. So statuses would be active, hold, or complete paid. If it's complete paid, I don't think you have anything that's been marked paid yet to look at, but it will show you the date that it was paid as well.
Right. That's essentially working off of the payment confirmation coming back from NetSuite.
Correct.
Okay.
And then in terms of the exported to ERP, correct. When the export runs to deliver the payment to NetSuite, it will receive this exported to ERP flag, and that ensures that a payment is not going to be submitted twice. So once something is exported, it gets this flag, and it's not going to be exported again. The flag will also show it has a timestamp for when it was date and time of when it was exported.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Great questions. Okay, so in terms of the payment processing workflow, the coordinator, it will compile the payment collection, confirm that these are the payments that are ready to be made, validate their amounts and the payees. And then when coordinator is ready, they move the collection to the next status, which is approved for review. I'm not actually going to do that because it would generate email alerts to you. So there are payment approvers who are defined for each payment based off of the type of payment and the project it's in, as well as the amount. And as soon as the collection moves to approved for review or status review, that all of the approvers for those payments will receive an email alert notifying them that there's action pending on their part to review and approve payments. As soon as payments complete the approval process, they are in the queue for being submitted to NetSuite. And so moving this to review, the collection would go to review. approvers will receive the email alert. The email alert contains a URL to this interface called My Payment Approvals. This is user specific. So depending on the payments that are in review and are assigned to that approver's user, those payments would show up here. And it's a similar interface to this where you can see you have the option to include a payment for approval or exclude a payment. So exclude would be like rejecting the approval, and excluding while approving, if you exclude a payment, that's going to pull it from that collection. Doing so will send an email alert to the coordinator notifying them that a payment was not approved. It was removed from their collection, and that restores the payment. It restores it back to open commitments, but there might need to be some internal coordination there about why that payment was not approved. But it pulls it out of the workflow for processing the payments. And so there's this approved selected. So there's like some options for bulk selecting payments when you're reviewing them. You select which payments you approve, and then select the button for approved selected payments. While a collection is at review, each payment can be approved as soon as a payment completes the approval process. It can be in the queue. It will be in the queue for being pushed to NetSuite. When all of the payments in a collection are approved, the collection will go to in process. So just something to be aware of. If, for example, there's 10 payments in a collection, 8 of them have been approved, those 8 can be processed. The 2 that are pending approval are not going to hold up the submitting of those payments to NetSuite. The collection itself won't actually move to this in process status until everything is approved, but just something to keep in mind between review and in process. So in terms of the workflow or the way that payments are moving, as soon as a payment or collection goes to review, those payments are going to be actively reviewed, and as they are approved, they will go into the queue for payment. Once all of the payments in a collection, once we've received return data from NetSuite confirming that the payments have been paid, the collection will and everything in the collection is paid, the collection goes to archive status.
Thanks, Clay, for highlighting that. Barry's got a question.
Yeah, please. Sorry, I'm not paying close attention to hands being
No,
raised.
no,
go ahead.
that's quite all right. Hey, so I set up that batch there that says June 1 through 30.
Yeah.
Would you mind clicking on that?
Sure.
So if you see that red error message, I'm assuming that, for the time being, if I wanted to submit something for review, I'd have to exclude those particular payments. I think those are for like I think they're mostly the Norris projects that maybe just isn't fully set up yet. Yeah, that's correct.
Right.
So I would have to exclude those, correct?
That's right. So this comp ID, that's a Radian identifier for each payment. And so if I just see what's going on with this. So this is comp ID. This is Norris here. So if we were to look at our Norris payments.
Hey Clay, I can cut in here. We had a side conversation about this issue on email.
Yeah. Sure.
That project is not the DOA hasn't been set up because it's it's one of those projects we just need to do outside because we haven't done the full onboarding.
Sure. Right. So exactly, the system does not allow you to move a collection into review if the approval scheme has not been defined for all of the payments in that collection. So that's what this is flagging, and that's correct. If you were to exclude these payments, then you would be able to move the collection forward to review.
And Bartley, in this case, is that what we should be doing for this one collection? Exclude Norris for now?
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay. So Clay, just to kind of talk through this, you would filter then project by Norris, and you can select each of those exclude buttons and submit. Would that take?
That's right.
Would that process take it out? Okay.
That's right. Yeah. So if you exclude these payments would go back to open commitments. And then if you removed all of the Norris project payments here, this alert would go away and you'll be able to update this to review.
Okay.
All right. So in terms of a good segue to take a look at the approval scheme. So we have an admin for the approval scheme, and I think there's also a discussion going on about who will receive permissions to administrate the approval scheme here. But just for reference, this is the admin for the payment approvals, and we have the ability to define what we call schemes for approval. And so each scheme can define which projects are included in that, and then which types of payments have the approvers set up. And so payment approvals can occur in a sequence and can be defined by either user or project team role assignment, and then the amount that position can approve. So just looking at scheme 1 here, there's payments up to $1 million are first going to go to Anna, and then following Kate will also approve, and Kate has approval up to 50,000. Above 50,000, the second approver would be Gordon, and then Gordon has permission up to 250,000. Above 250,000, the second approver would be James. So each
and Clay,
a
couple comments here, just kind of for the benefit of the rest of the team. Barley and I were also having the side conversation. I think for now, in the short term, I'm gonna kind of do the administration of this or any changes that need to happen. The reason why I like Anna in position 1, we're really kind of treating this as that position 1 always has to be the primary first approver. So the dollar threshold doesn't really actually come into play. Anna's gonna sign off on everything. And then, Kate and then the dollar thresholds will start to come into play. But it ensures that we're having at least 2 reviewers on everything. And then I had a question about you said based on the type of payments, and I was reviewing this, Barley, it doesn't look like we have any distinction based on sequence, development, construction, operation, manual. It's consistent across the board based on position. But Clay, when you say the type of payment, is that really by the status, the current status of that project? So as a project moves status from development to construction, that's when essentially that construction approval scheme will take over from there forward until it's moved to an operations?
Yeah, so it's actually based on the payment, and but that's a good question. So payments are generated based off of the agreement term period. So development, construction, and operations are the term periods defined by the agreement. So an agreement can generate development payments when construction is triggered. It'll generate construction payments when operations is triggered. It will generate operations payments. So those payments are assigned to it. It corresponds to the phases of the project, but
it's independent from like the today status of the project.
Right. So for example, project might transition from construction to operations, but for whatever reason, there were some lingering payments from construction. The payment approval is based off of whatever is defined in the payment description. So this is actually this part of the description here, construction period 1. This is actually pulled from the agreement term period that generated this payment.
Okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Right. And so, yep, that's good context for the approval schemes. Yeah, that's something to be aware of. So Anna here may not necessarily have authority to go up to $1 million, but we want everything to go through Anna first. And then there's going to be a second level of review on all payments. And there are a variety of collections here. So in the demo, we're looking at Grandview, the approver here for Grandview construction. First, we'll go to Bartley, and then we'll either go to Mark or Mac. All right. Any other questions?
I guess I don't yet have the permission, so I'm not seeing the same screen that you are, but in the payment approval scheme, you had what looked like expanding plus signs on each category. It looks like I would just be toggling different people's names, dollar thresholds, but what's kind of the plus sign above each column?
Yeah, so right, so we can do a quick demo here. So if you want to, you can either add a project to an existing scheme or adjust who's in the positions. If you need a new scheme, there's the plus available here. It'll create a new scheme all the way at the bottom. And so we'll just scroll down. And then you could grab a project.
Can you have overlapping projects in multiple schemes?
Yeah, there's not necessarily a restriction on creating overlapping approvals. If you were to do that, the payment would actually have to go through all of the approvals.
Got it.
No, that's not true. It would have to go through one. I think it would have to go through one of the approval schemes. So yes, you need to take some caution about creating overlapping schemes.
Okay. Yeah, which won't be our intention, but as you look into creating a new scheme, it looked like you had full ability to select any of the projects in the draft.
That's right. That's right. And theoretically, you could have one scheme doing a certain type of payment or for a certain amount, and then another scheme doing something else. So there aren't built-in restrictions in terms of potentially creating overlapping schemes.
Okay, understood.
And so give the scheme a name, select the projects that it applies to, and then this plus here is to add a position. So I think there's up to like 8 positions that can be created, and then you can select the users that you want to have here, put in their limits, and then when you're done setting this up, just like to actually apply this scheme, you'd have to select save.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's helpful.
Okay. So I think that covers most, it should be, that's the payment processing workflow. Nice. Let's see. June has moved to review. Excellent. And so just to take a step back for a moment, in terms of reviewing these payments, if for whatever reason something looks off, so here's an interesting example. So these first 4 payments that I selected for our demo collection are all from the Shords entity, and you can see that there are 4 different payees here, and 3 of them are receiving the same payment, and then Carol is receiving the largest payment. And so if you're interested or you need to dive a little bit deeper to see, okay, what's going on? How did these payments get generated? Why did they show up like this? You can have perspective or gain visibility on that by going into the entity. I'll just open that up in a new tab here so we can get back easily to our demo collection. But this is the land entity view. And on the first tab, well, we can see we're in this project, Grand View, and then we're looking at the Shords entity. The first tab is for landowners. And here's where the landowners are defined for this entity, and that creates a relationship to any of the parcels that are seated in this entity, and then any of the agreements that are seated on any of those parcels will all have, they all will share this distinct landowner configuration. And so ownership and payment distribution is defined here. Sometimes they're different. In terms of generating payments, we're going to be most interested in the payment distribution. So here we can see that 4 of these landowners are getting 15% of the payment, and then the 4th payee, Carol, is getting 55% of the payment distribution. So we can validate those payments based off of the information that we're looking at here. There's also some helpful information, or just in terms of this data being seeded here, you have visibility on that. There's an entity agreement tab, so we can see which agreements are seated in this entity, and then which parcels they apply to. So this is a lease agreement, it's at status executed and recorded, and this is the land parcel contained within this agreement. The land master list, which, before we move on, you can also gain some additional insight to the details of this agreement by opening up View Edit Terms. And so we can see when the effective date is. We can also see the duration of the agreement term periods. So this is development, construction, and operations. These term periods can be used to, or they are used to schedule the payments. So this relates to the payment approval scheme. Going back to the question that we had earlier in terms of what are these different sequences or types of payments represent. There's development, construction, and operations. That aligns with the development, construction, and operation term periods that are defined within the agreement. The next tab over is Land Master List. We've got visibility on the parcels that are seated here. There's just one parcel. It's signed, which represents that it's in the signed agreement. We can see the area and some of the other data points for this parcel here. Another helpful interface here is the compliance tab at the land entity level, compliance represents the payment obligations. So these are the same payment obligations that we were looking at in our payment collection. We just have a slightly different perspective on them. We can see similar data points in terms of the amount when they're due. In this view, we can see what milestone triggered or scheduled this payment. Let's see what else. We can see who's getting paid. And at the entity level, we can see all of the payments that have been generated here. So during construction, we can see there's annual recurring payments on 6/30. There's 4 payments each year to the 4 payees. And we can see all the instances of the recurrences here. You can, by default, the compliance table is only going to show you active payments, but you have the option you could filter by active or complete. There's also hold. You could just grab everything in here, and then you can see it looks like we've, since this agreement was actually from 2018, there's development payments that have just been backfilled and marked complete within the system, but we have visibility on that here as well. And then payments are switching over to construction based off of this construction commencement actual milestone. That's something else that's helpful to look at. There's these gears fly out on the right-hand side of the screen. This is available within each project. So it's not available within Payment Manager, but if you open up a project, you have these blue gears that are available here. If I just hover my mouse over that, the star icon represents compliance milestones. I can see the project milestones. So we're looking at grand view. And these are the project milestones. You can see which milestones have been triggered, which ones have not been triggered. We've got visibility on expected versus actual milestones. We also can see there's a green dot here. This represents that there are compliance items or land agreement payments associated to this milestone. This is green because the milestone has already been triggered. There's a yellow dot next to COD actual. This indicates that when COD actual is triggered, that will schedule the compliance items that are associated to COD actual. All right. And was this a recent question for Bartley? Oh, Bartley somehow dropped and he's back. Hi, Bartley. Kate has a question for you in the chat.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I hit leave by accident. Can we use the info in GIT as a source of truth? Yes. So for background, any payment that's going in for your approval has been vetted by me or someone else or a developer who knows the project. That said, if you're a payee, if you're responsible for an approval, definitely recommend you check the number, make sure it's right. If it's not, let's figure something out to make sure it gets corrected.
That kind of raised a question for me, Clay. On some of the screens, and when you're digging into more details about project level payees, percentages, and there was like the view edit ability. Can we talk about the permissions for who can edit certain things? And
sure.
some like at some point I'm gonna have some additional kind of deep dive audit questions. For background, our auditors we're testing our IT systems pretty rigorously this year. Green IT was not in scope because we hadn't gone live yet, but it will be in scope this year.
Yeah.
So at some point, some other people could probably drop. We could dive into that because it'll be less about the functionality and the roles, but just some more of the background and the reporting.
Just as a preview, I guess, now we don't have to get into it in depth, but in view edit, there are agreement periods that we're defining. So these are the specific agreement period term periods that we're looking at, development, and this is how the data is seeded. These are like the input variables that are going to generate the payments. And then there's agreement terms. These are all the different payment terms that are seeded to generate the payments that we're looking at. In terms of editing ability, we can discuss more offline but just for now, because this agreement is at status executed and payments have been generated, no one can edit these inputs while this agreement is at this status. So setting an agreement to an executed status calculates and generates the payments based off of these inputs, and then locks all of these inputs. Related to that, you wouldn't want someone to just go in and be changing agreement variables for a signed agreement. So the agreement is signed, it can't be changed.
Okay, great.
Hey, Clay, one sort of
yeah.
caveat on this one, maybe you can discuss is in the case of Grandview, the lease amount scales by what it's normal term is CPI, but in this case it's GDP CPI. And I think there's a step that needs to happen where an administrator is going to go in and say what that increase rate is on an annual basis. So that's an opportunity for, an audit side of things, like who's going to do that, right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
In terms of CPI escalation?
Yeah, like permissions to set the new rate of increase, whether it's CPI or something else. Is that like Nate would do that, or a defined user group would do that?
Yeah, we could discuss who would have permissions for that. Okay. There's a CPI admin. That's just for capturing CPI. I'm not sure if you're also asking about if they're like for determining which type of escalation that would how that would occur. But yeah, we can review that. The system is designed to be role-based with permissions, so we can define specific roles and who has access to which interfaces.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
And just that is interesting to know, Bartley. Is this Grandview only, or is that would we expect to see that on other projects? Some sort of variable scale percentage of increase on an annual basis that needs to be kind of like entered into the system in some way?
Oh, we really hate it, but it's there on some of them.
Got it.
So like some of like Grandview, we stepped into this term on the front end when we're signing our own agreements. We're trying to avoid that and agree to something that's like a fixed rate like 3% every year or something like that. But sometimes to get the deal done, the landlord will say, I want some protection from inflation. So like tie it to CPI or something, and then we have to go in and figure it out.
We have.
And then Clay, would you imagine that it would be some sort of like take the agreement out of executed status, make the adjustments we need to, and then put it back in as re-executed? Or
correct?
Is there a functionality where we basically say like we tell you that this year's CPI is this amount and that's what it will calculate?
Well, I guess both of those.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting into some interesting territory here, but just so you can see, like for a specific payment, we have a variety of different escalations that are available. CPI is one of them. There can be different CPI indexes that are referenced. As that CPI data becomes available, it is captured in the system, and as it becomes captured in the system, payments that reference that will run their escalation calculation and then update their amount. There's can be a minimum or a maximum as well. So, if there's crazy inflation, then there might be a maximum. We're saying, okay, we're going to max out at 5%, or CPI is less than that, then it'll run off the CPI escalation. So there's a lot of different ways to control that. As Bartley was saying, might just do straight 3% escalation, and that's how it escalates. So we account for a very wide variety of different payment circumstances. These inputs to adjust them, we're going to say, okay, this isn't actually going to be a CPI. I would go to percentage to make that change correct. Someone would need to adjust this agreement from being executed, potentially set it to draft, or something that's not executed, make the change, and then set it back to executed. As part of doing that, the payments that are available would, right now, as it's being executed, those would all be removed. Go to draft, you apply an update, set it back to execute. It's going to recalculate and regenerate all of the payments. So that's really agreement workflow based, which is also permission based. So I think we've had a little bit of discussions about the agreement workflow, but we'd be happy to discuss further in terms of who's responsible or who has permissions to make those changes or apply those changes, in terms of updating or adjusting agreement terms. And then separately, there's also the CPI index admin. So, if something's just set to run off of the CPI index, as soon as the next month's CPI data becomes available and is captured in the system, any payments that are referencing that CPI value are just going to automatically get updated.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
hope that answered your question. Or
it does.
Okay.
No,
Great. Yeah.
I'll say the detail and the functionality is it's impressive. Barley, I don't know if that's like every year it's going to be like by January 30th or something, like on an annual basis we would do this, but just thinking ahead of what our process will need to be, whoever's going to be responsible for this, to kind of coordinate basically like taking any payments out of commitments in order to get the escalation amount correct and then re-execute it. Who does that process and how we coordinate, like not to pull a collection while something's still being drafted. You know what I mean?
Well, I had a demo of this, Clay, step in if this is incorrect, with Catherine the other day, where there's like in the features menu, there's like this table where you enter all the CPI adjusters and stuff, and you never need to pull agreements out of approved and recorded. You're just setting the schedules. So for example, if it's escalating by 2% now, but then next year it's 3%, that change is going to get automatically applied to that schedule.
That's right. Yeah,
right. So it's
right.
pretty,
Yeah,
it's really, I was impressed by that functionality. It's going to make our lives really easy.
So here's the GDP index. And yeah, just to reinforce that concept that Bartley just mentioned, you wouldn't need to set an agreement to draft just to capture a new CPI payment. If there's and I'm not sure if you have any CPI data right now, but the payment would show its amount without the CPI escalation because you don't know what the CPI is going to be in advance. Those payments that are pending CPI will be flagged as pending CPI. And even though they show up as a payment obligation, and they would be, you would have visibility of them on open commitments, because they're pending CPI, you can't actually add it to a payment collection for processing because that payment, its final amount has not been determined. You might see the base amount without the escalation, but it'll show you that pending CPI flag. In terms of calculating that payment, as soon as the CPI index value becomes available. And I don't know if we have any CPI data here. I think we have this index seeded, but we haven't captured the values yet. As soon as those values become, the CPI index values become available to calculate that payment that's pending the CPI escalation, that escalation automatically gets applied to that payment. The payment amount will get updated. And when that calculation is complete, that payment would then be available to be put into a payment collection for processing. So there's no need to update the payment terms for that. It's already been seeded. The agreement
Okay.
signed, it's seeded. The system is just essentially on standby waiting for those CPI values to be captured, and then the payments will calculate.
And the CPI values themselves are being pulled in automatically to Green IT?
No, they're not
That's
automatically
where,
captured.
yeah, that's where process comes in. We'll need to figure out who
I
and
see.
when that happens, so it doesn't get missed.
Got it. Okay, yeah, and I think that part of it, Bartley, we can take offline, but just thinking ahead of, if different projects are on different cadences, how we get a line of communication and process in place. But thank you for that. That was helpful detail.
Yeah, sure. And typically, once something is executed, there should not be a need to adjust the payment terms at that point. I mean, obviously, there are circumstances where it comes up, and potentially if something was seeded incorrectly or for whatever reason something needs to get updated, we have the ability to do so. But in terms of normal use case workflow, there should not be a reason for an end user to have to adjust the status of an executed and recorded agreement.
Hey, Clay, I know we're just
Yeah.
about at time, and I wanted to, I'm not sure if we maybe could just sort of show for the developers and approvers sort of like what that is going to look like for them and the steps they need to take.
For approving payments?
Yep.
Yeah, sure. I can, so for example, this collection for June, we can look at this and I'll just refresh. I think I've got some stale data here. Yeah. Okay. So these are the approvers in this collection, and you've got visibility on which payments are pending approval by which approver. The actual approving process. So each one of these approvers just received, Barry updated this a few moments ago to review. At that time, each one of these approvers received an email alert notifying them that there are payments pending their approval. The approval process, there'll be a URL in that email alert, and which will direct each of those approvers to this interface. This interface is user specific. So while logged in, since I'm not an approver, I don't see anything here, but the payments will show up here, and you have the ability to include the payment for approval, and then you would approve the selected, or exclude a payment, which would remove it from the collection and send it back to open commitments. For each of the users that are approvers, there's also this dollar icon next to your username that will just so that's available from wherever you are. You click on that, it's going to take you to My Payment Approvals. There's also a daily email alert that will go out at, I think it's 9 a.m. Eastern. So if you have pending approvals, you'll get a daily digest notifying your daily reminder, your approval is pending on these payments.
And Clay, for the benefit of people that weren't on yesterday, we talked briefly about So the first approver in the scheme would get the email first, and then when it's approved by that person and moves to the second one in the scheme, that's when it would trigger an email to that second reviewer to.
That's right. Yeah. So in terms of the sequence, it actually is a sequence. So whoever if there's a second level approver, they will not receive their notification about approving until the first level is completed.
And you mentioned that there's visibility to see who it's currently sitting with, and a roadmap functionality to maybe see kind of who else is in line in the future.
That's right. There's a forthcoming update. Thanks for pointing that out. Forthcoming update. This currently we're just showing who who the next approver in the sequence is, who's pending. This interface is going to get an update, so it will actually show the sequence of who's required and who is already approved, so you can see exactly where this payment is in that approval sequence.
Thanks. And correct me if I'm wrong here. We talked about, if someone goes on leave for a week and someone else needs to kind of step into their role. Right now, I think we're going to have to kind of manage that manually, but essentially it would sit in someone's inbox or approvals until that person actually comes back.
That's right. And that's also trying to look up real quickly where we have a ticket. This is in the queue for being able to designate delegate authority to another approver for a set period of time and then revoke that ability as well. So that's in the queue in terms of if you are an approver and you're not going to be available. This functionality does not exist today, but it's in the roadmap, and being able to assign that authority to someone else.
Thanks for that, Clay. Yeah, so as
Yeah.
a team, we'll just have to kind of coordinate around that a bit more.
Uh-huh. Yeah, just it's sort of related to that, just something to point out in terms of this collection just moved from draft to review. And so these are the approvers who are signed here. The approval scheme, is it like the approval scheme for these payments is based off of the approval scheme admin. When this collection moved to review, it assigned the approval sequence for these payments based off of this admin. If this admin were to be updated, it would not change the approver sequence for these payments since it's like the approval sequence is applied at the moment that the collection moves to review. If it needed to be updated, so for example, if someone was going on vacation and we wanted to assign this to someone else, we could update that in the admin. To apply that to these payments, we would have to send this back to draft and then move it to review again to like reset the approvers. Related to that, once a payment is approved, it's in the queue to go to NetSuite. There's no unapproving something. You at least not easily. If you flagged it to us, we could try to, we could hold it. We actually we could pause the sync if needed, but there's no unapproving. So once something gets approved, even if this collection were to go back to draft or something, the approval would remain on that payment. So once it achieves like final approval or through the sequence, that payment becomes approved. It's no longer pending anyone. So just a little bit of nuance to the approval scheme.
That's helpful. And I
Yeah.
think we kind of talked a bit about this. And, if that were to happen, DevCo team flags for accounting and we deal with it on the NetSuite side. We put a hold on our own payment. There's other ways to claw it back, but understand
Right.
that functionality is not on the Green IT side.
Right. Yeah. That's good to point out. So, yeah, things are moving. They're moving in one direction. So it's, from draft to review to getting approved to submitting the payment to NetSuite. Once those steps are completed, the payments are going to be moving in that direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we're at time. I want to let other people ask any other questions and then drop off. But Clay, would you have another 5 minutes or so for some more kind of audit specific questions I could ask?
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Then I'd say anyone else on the line that wants to ask their questions first, and then we could probably end the recording and I can ask my questions.
I'm all set.
Cool.
Right.
Thanks again, Clay. Appreciate this. Could you send us the
let's
recording once
stop.
ready?